So, Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the show today. I would like to welcome you on the show.
Thanks. Glad to be here. It's a long time coming, I think.
Yes, certainly it has been. Yeah, really looking forward to having this conversation with you. So, maybe can you begin by introducing yourself to the audience? Tell us more about yourself and your company.
Sure. So my name is Jim Gavigan. I own a company called Industrial Insight, and we work in I call it the data-driven process optimization space. What our history has been is, and just I'll tell a little bit about my background, but traditionally we've been working a lot with people who own the PI system. That is a historian slash data infrastructure. And we try to help them really use it much more proactively instead of just, hey, something broke, let's go look in Pi and see what happened. We try to keep them from breaking stuff and from getting into the ditch from a process standpoint. How can we help you, keep things, where you should be instead of, hey, something broke, we need to go look. And, my background, I actually started out, very first job out of college was a vibration analysis job in 1995. So that has actually paid off a bunch of times, just kind of understanding that concept and rotating equipment seems to come up every job that I've ever done. Then I was a controls engineer for 6 years. I cut my teeth on Modicon PLCs, did TI, Square D, a lot of other stuff. Worked for Rockwell Automation for 6 years, both on the sales side. I transitioned into the sales side because I was tired of working weekends, holidays, and getting calls at night, all that. Being an engineer, even though I loved the work, it was just time to move and unplug a little bit. So I got into sales. Worked for Rockwell for 6 years, and then I did a technical consulting role my last year there. So I was on the sales side, but I was like a technical resource, pre-sales to immediate post-sales. And I worked for a system integrator out of Memphis called Logical Systems, and helped them with their business development activities. But I never got to put the technical hat down because there were times that they just needed technical expertise. So I did some of that, and that's where I got introduced to the PI system. And we helped a large food manufacturer. They were actually making cattle feed, and we helped them land a new customer, which doubled their business. So they had to build a whole new plant to support this business. And I went, wow, this data thing,
Yeah.
just made two companies millions of dollars. That's even what I called it because I didn't know what else to call it. But that was the first time I had ever proactively used data to optimize a batch process or any process. And then we saw the results. It literally helped them land a new customer. And it was truly an amazing experience. So fast forward maybe 3 years from that, and OSIsoft recruited me. And so I went to work for them for a couple of years, selling Pi. And that's when I moved down here to Florida. I took a strategic account manager role, and I dealt with a lot of really large, companies in various industries, power, paper, chemicals, et cetera. And so, I got to learn a lot more about the IT side of things and kind of how all that worked. But the thing that was always a struggle for me was I could very clearly see all the things we were releasing, all the new functionality, how that could be used. I would kill to have that when I was a controls engineer trying to figure out problems. I couldn't get people to see how much this was going to benefit them. And so when I had my third boss in 2 years and he and I didn't get along at all, and I just wasn't going to compromise who I am, I left, or I was going to get fired. I was on a performance improvement. I mean, we're going to fire you plan, unfortunately. And I realized, I don't do well in corporate America because I will just tell it like it is.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not the right thing to do. I guess I haven't learned that, but I can't help myself. But so anyway, when I left there, I went back to LSI and started their Pi practice, and then realized I really needed to do this on my own. And so, we do Pi system. We've gotten into business intelligence. We do a lot with Power BI, a little bit with Tableau. We've gotten into multivariate analysis and, some other tools. Friend of both of ours, Jeff Nepper over at Flow, where we just signed a partner agreement with them, just had a press release last week on that. so what we really try to do is help people use their manufacturing data proactively. That's really what we're trying to get people to do. Instead of just reacting to things, we're trying to get them to, I always use the analogy, people are looking out their rearview mirror, when dealing with their data, right? And we try to get them looking out the windshield. It's much larger. You can see ahead of you where you're going, where you're at. That's not to say you never look in the rearview mirror. We do that when driving, but that's not where we focus our attention, right? We focus our attention on the windshield. It's much larger for us. So we try to get people looking out the windshield. And so that's really the mission of our company is to help people use data better and to drive actual real cost savings and profitability. So that's
Awesome.
us.
Yeah, awesome. That's a really great career you've got there, Jim, and you certainly are the expert when it comes to data-driven manufacturing. And that's why I thought you'd be the perfect person to have this conversation on this specific topic of data-driven optimization.
Yep.
So maybe to kind of like kick
Appreciate
things
that.
off, can you briefly explain what it means to be a data-driven organization, what it means to like data-driven optimization in the context of the process industry?
Yeah. So I'll kind of start with where I just left off, right? Is that looking out the rearview mirror. And what I found when I began selling Pi was talking to the people actually out using the software. Okay. It was very strange to me because everyone I was talking to was in IT.
Yep.
That was who was managing the Pi systems. But the people actually using it and getting benefit out of it was the people in OT and process control engineers and operations people. Like, why am I not talking to them? And why are you not talking to them? So what I really tried to, or what we really try to focus on is getting people, as I said, looking out that windshield, right? So instead of having a problem that keeps recurring is, well, let's build some kind of a solution. It could be something in the Pi system. It could be just a simple dashboard in Pi Vision that shows you when that problem is about to happen, or when quality is going off spec, or when you're about to have downtime, and there's some key markers for that. Sometimes it could be something as simple as a dashboard. It could be an email notification ahead of time. Sometimes we use multivariate models to understand what drives a quality parameter in a certain way because they don't have a good understanding of it. But what you're really trying to do is take those bottlenecks and those problems that you have as a manufacturer and try to gain a better understanding, get ahead of it, right? And move that bottleneck somewhere else and then go attack that one, right? So really that's what we try to help our customers do. And I'm finding that we're very unique. We actually don't even, there's a lot of, let me back up just a second. There's a lot of integrators in our space that can do a lot of the things we do, and they do it very well. What they want, though, is a very clear box and scope of work that we're going to do X, right? You're going to, Mr. or Miss Customer, you're going to tell us to do exactly what you need. More times than not, what we're finding is customers don't even know what they want or need. They just know they have this problem. They have a bunch of data and they have no idea how to solve the problem using that data. And we just we're finishing up an engagement with a large paper company at one of their mills. And it started out where I went to their facility, spent almost a week there, and I sat through all their morning meetings to see how they were using data to drive those conversations, right? And what I found was they were working really hard to get at the data that they needed. And a great example is I asked the mill manager, I said, so what keeps you up at night? And he said, well, it's not necessarily keeps me up at night, but let's just say the first thing I look at when I come in the morning is I look at, is our mill in balance? They have what they call a single line mill, right? It's one digester, one paper machine. It's kind of one of everything. So if one process outruns the other one, then they start having problems, right? So he tries to keep everything, in a nice balance. And I said, well, how do you how do you understand that? And he said, well, I go to this screen, I look at these numbers, then I go to this screen, I look at those numbers, then I go look at this screen, look at those numbers. And he's kind of like doing all this stuff in his head.
Yeah.
I'm like, why don't you just have one screen that tells you whether or not you're in balance, gives you all the key numbers, tells you when this is running too fast, this is running too slow, and you're going to crash. Why don't you just have a screen that tells you all of that? Well, I guess I never thought of it. And so we built a screen to do that, and of course there's some calculations running under the hood. There's some things that we had to do to get all of that kind of wrapped up. But now he's not going to have to go to one screen. He'll be able to look at it on his phone, get a real quick sense of how things are going. And what was interesting is watching their morning meetings, the the first thing they put up was a Power BI sheet. So I was like, oh, this is good. This is a great thing. And they were talking about some metrics and things like that. The next thing they went to was a handwritten environmental sheet. Like, okay, we just went back 20 years now.
Yeah.
And they were talking about like water usage and stuff like that. And I'm looking at them like, where do they get that? I'm literally looking. They know exactly where to look, but it was very difficult. And then they went to this very complex PiVision screen that had a certain part of their process, had a bunch of the key numbers on it. And there's probably 200 numbers on this screen, and graphics and, stuff going everywhere. And I hear them start talking like, well, kappa is this, and, this metric is doing that. And I'm like, where are they getting that? I'm looking at this screen. I'm like, this is too complex.
Yeah.
Why do you not have all of this just like a mill dashboard that shows you, here's all our key metrics, where, and here's how we're running, then you can drill down into details from there. Right. And so what we've really kind of tried to help them do is just simplify their look at things. Like when people are working too hard to see when they're going off spec or out of balance. Right. So that's kind of the thought process behind this whole, data-driven process optimization. It came to me, I guess, over the summer that, hey, maybe this is really what we do, because we're part process engineer,
Yep.
We're part IT, we're part consultant, we're part integrator. So we fill a lot of roles,
Yeah.
And we try to look at things through the lens of a process engineer or an operations manager. Like how I tell all my people, understand our customers' business and how they look at things, and then try to imagine being in their shoes and say, what would I need to run this better? And build that. You'll be really close. You're not going to get it all right. That's okay. Yeah. But it gives that customer a sense of, well, I would have never thought of that. Now that you've shown me that, now here's what I want. And that's kind of in essence what we do. So sometimes that ambiguity is great for us.
Yeah,
that helps. Does that make sense?
Yeah, certainly does. Yeah, I mean, so I find that in some cases, when you're dealing with like process engineers or people who are sitting with the problem, it's in most cases it might not be hard to convince them that this is what you need to do, but the other aspect of it is really kind of like convincing business leaders to adopt like a different way or a new approach to solving problems. So
yep.
In your perspective, what are the significant opportunities that you think are available to get like buy-in from business leaders? Or maybe if you've got an example to share of a situation where like data storytelling really resonated with the business leadership.
Yeah, there's a couple. That is a challenge. Like one of the things that we fight this constantly. I've got a myriad of projects that we've done that just died, that we were really proud of. We really thought that was going to really help drive the business in a much better direction. And then what happens is key people leave or move, within the company. Yeah. It might be this young hotshot engineer that we've been working with who's got these great ideas. We build something for them. They figure out, hey, they're really smart. We're going to promote them. It dies, right? Or they leave the company and go do something else, or, a key leader, leaves. Our history is riddled with that boneyard of things. So what I think we've really tried to do is get everyone from the operator to the management team, however high that is, we're working at an individual plant level, make sure it's like the plant and operations manager, to drive that. If it's a corporate, initiative, we try to make sure that corporate understands, but then you have to get down to the plant level. And sometimes they don't want to listen to corporate, and sometimes for good reason. Sometimes, corporate says they're there to help, but they're really not. And it's not that they don't mean to, but I don't know. It's a struggle. We see it constantly. So, I mean, I think a really good example we have, I've got a couple that I wrote down. I've got some notes kind of over here.
Yep.
One of them was at a chemical plant, and this is one that goes back several years, but it has, I know, saved this company millions of dollars. And this was one actually I did several years ago. But they had this issue where they're bringing an incoming stream of material into the plant, and then they extract what they need, make products out of it, and then put the rest back into the ground to keep well pressures up. So it's almost like a microcosm of the oil and gas industry, right? They have upstream with a well, they have midstream with a pipeline, and then they have basically a refinery, so downstream, right? So it's kind of a microcosm of that. They had a problem where at the most inopportune moments, they would get a contamination from an oil and grease incursion, which is bad for a lot of the products that they make. And kind of the way it worked is it would get to the plant, and then it would go through they would do a stripping process, and then it would go through purification. Well, at the end of the purification process, they were lab sampling every 4 hours. All of a sudden, they would go from 5 parts per million to 800 parts per million of oil and grease. Wait, stop the presses. Where's all this material? Who's got some of it? Have you made anything with it? So literally they would have to shut down, and they make a lot of stuff. And, this is a pretty, lucrative business for them. And so it was a really bad day when that happened, because then you would have to figure out, all right, we got to get that back to the recycle tank. We're going to figure out how to rework it. Some stuff you just would have to dispose of because you couldn't recover it. And so I worked with them for about 6 weeks. This was our first foray into machine learning, and that was a nightmare. I learned a lot about how machine learning works, how they think, all that through that process. And I've got a funny story about that. Maybe we'll get to. But anyway, I ended up with working with their engineers, understanding the process. I ended up building just a simple dashboard with a weighted calculation based on first principles, based on stuff that they knew. Like, hey, if we see the specific gravity of the incoming stream drop by X amount, and it was minuscule, it was small. Yeah. You wouldn't think it was statistically significant, but the oil and grease would drop that specific gravity just enough, where they would see it. And it had a very distinct marker. It almost looked like a check mark. So that would happen. We would see a spike in an incinerator that was in that stripping process, and there was a couple other things we would see. So I just built a weighted calculation. They would say, hey, here's how much of a chance I think you have of this oil and grease incursion. Well, it took a few revisions, and I worked with some of their engineers. I mean, it wasn't just all me, as much as I would love to just take credit for it. It wasn't all me. They had a lot to say about it. I just thought of a way to put it together that they had never thought of. Yeah. And they had a graph. And if they hadn't done this, I wouldn't have been able to do what they're doing. They had a spaghetti graph, as I like to call it. There was a bunch of trends on a screen, probably 10 pins. There was a red box or a red outline around the trend when this event happened, and then some letters and numbers turned red. But you really couldn't tell what was going on. You had to know what you were looking at. Well, I just boiled all that down into a 0 to 100% chance of, hey, I think you're going to have an oil and grease calculation. I put it at the top left of the screen. And then what they were able to do is if they saw that number creep up, they could go out and sample it and say, oh yeah, we've got this event, and then just run it to the recycle tank. As soon as it cleared, they would start producing again. So that way they wouldn't make a bunch of bad product. Yeah. And this has saved them millions of dollars. And so that was actually an operator tool that the plant manager, the operations manager, even some people up in corporate were like, holy crap, this is really pretty dang impressive. Like, we need to do more of this, right? That's when it hits home,
Yeah.
when you catch something like that. And you don't always do it. There was one that we did for a midstream pipeline company. It's kind of funny. I talked to them not really that long ago. This is one of those old boneyard projects that died, but there was a learning in here that was super powerful. Is they knew that they probably had a $20 million opportunity at this one station. In if they just ran the pumps, and these are massive pumps, like 6,000 horsepower pumps, at or near their best efficiency point, right? And it was, I think it was like 70 to 120% of their best efficiency point. And so they were doing some stuff in Tableau, kind of looking at it a little bit rear view mirror, like where were we running? And I said, I can build that in PyVision. Ben Still, who works for me, had just done a 3-stage compressor curve for another of our customers. And I said, a pump curve is a lot simpler. If you just give me the equations, I can build you a real-time pump curve and, tell you where you're running and whether you're, in or around your BEP. So I did that in it took us just a couple of weeks to do it. And it was telling, because then I was able to tell them, I think I did the first demo in like April, and I was able to tell them, hey, you've been off BEP for 23 days, 6 hours and 4 minutes for this year. And I couldn't tell them I knew like about how much that was costing them. So I said, hey, look, I don't know the numbers, but I'm sure that's a really big number to you in throughput, right? And it saves on the equipment if you're running your pumps around the best efficiency point. You're not cavitating them or you're not overloading them. So they run better and longer. And so that was one where I think everyone at the corporate level saw it. The conversation I had with them, sometime like early this year was, Jim, you wouldn't believe how long it took us to actually get the operators and the operations people to actually run the way we were telling them to run. And it was millions of dollars. I mean, millions. And so this was one of those boneyard projects, because after we did the pilot, a bunch of things changed. A bunch of politics got involved. A bunch of people wanted to attach themselves to the project. And then it never really went forward. After a couple of fits and starts, they said, hey, we're going to use somebody else to do it, who's much larger than your company, because we think they're a better fit. And they ended up, getting kicked off the job, not through anything they did, but because that company couldn't get themselves organized. And now I've heard that there's even IT is doing something, and these reliability people who had all this savings couldn't even get a seat at the table. So sometimes there's nothing you can do as the integrator to do that. As the end user, you just have to keep selling it, keep talking to people, you have to find the right stakeholder who's got a checkbook and responsibility, and who wants to make a change in the organization, who wants to make a name for themselves, right? And sometimes that's the key. You have to find that one person who is like, hey, I'm really trying to make a name for myself here. If we go do that project and we get all these savings and do all this stuff, it gets me to my next step. Sometimes you have to do that. It's a trick, but and some companies it's hard to do. Like, it's almost impossible to do in some companies. I've found, and then others are becoming more data driven. So
Interesting.
It's a hard thing, because I wish I had it all figured out.
Yeah.
Because our history as Industrial Insight wouldn't be riddled with all these projects that never seem to come to fruition like we thought they should.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I mean, in cases where like you do get like buy-in, what do you see as being the primary challenges when transitioning from not data-driven to being a data-driven organization? What do you see? It could be technical, cultural. What are the primary or the common challenges that you come across in your experience?
Typically, it's cultural. It's typically, especially I've been in the southern United States for the last 25, no, longer than that, since 88. So 35 years. Is that right? My math's correct. Well, we've always done it that way. Why do we change now? That's what we run into, is people just don't want to change. I mean, most people don't like change. They like stability.
Yeah.
They like to know what their role is and how to do things. A lot of people just can't deal with it. And that's always, a challenge. But what you have to appeal to is, I'm trying to make your job easier. I'm trying to make it where, if it's the operator, they don't want to have to deal with problems all day and react to all of this stuff. They would much rather kick back, have their feet on the desk, and just watch the process run. It might be a little more boring, but it's a lot less stressful. Most of them would rather have that and a few little things here and there pop up, to kind of keep a little bit of excitement in the day, than just to have complete chaos all day. And then I think from a management perspective, you have to appeal to, and I think we're going to talk about this later, you have to appeal to the knowledge drain issue, right? Pretty much every plant in the US is getting younger. I was at this paper facility, and I think the plant manager told us, I'm trying to remember what the number was. It was like 45, 50% of his workforce had 6 years or less experience.
Yeah,
and so what you have to appeal to is those people that have been around who are getting ready to retire. You have to appeal to their legacy. And so what do you want to leave behind? Do you want to leave behind nothing and hope that the people behind you figure it out? You spent 25, 30, 35 years of your blood, sweat, and tears at this facility or in this company, and you don't want to leave it better? And a lot of times that gets them thinking a little. They're the ones that are tougher to change. And what I always tell them is, I'm not building these tools for you. You may have tools that help you solve these problems, albeit it takes you a while. I want these kids that are quote unquote kids that are coming in to have the same chance you do to solve these problems when you're gone. And so I think that, the big challenge is to get people to change and adopt, some changes. Change management's the biggest and the hardest part of what we do. And you just have to appeal to the operations or the engineers. I'm trying to make your life easier. To management, I'm trying to make your life less stressful and to make sure that you're still running well. And I'm trying to give your people a chance, when all this knowledge retires. So those, to me, the biggest challenge is change management. It's not usually the technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's usually the easy part.
Yeah.
We're all smart people. We can figure the technology out.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of young people coming in who've grown up with technology. They grew up with a phone or an iPad or, a computer at their, beck and call, attached to them. They know technology. It's not hard for them. I look at a lot of the stuff you do. I watched your, it was some kind of a data twin model that, in Azure that you were talking about, and all the JSON and stuff. To me, that's not at all appealing. I'm 53 or about to be 53. But to somebody like Ben or Nick or somebody that works for me who has written code, no problem. I can do that. I can do that in my sleep. And so the technology is usually not the hard part.
Yeah.
We can usually figure that part out. It's how do we do something that everybody buys into? And again, you just try to appeal to each stakeholder, what is it that actually drives them? What would actually appeal to them? How do we make your life easier? Whatever that means to you. To an operator, kick back and relax. Engineer, not have to sit there and delve through piles of data all day. Just have that data ready and get you an answer quickly, give you something you can explore and get to your answer and move on about your day. Start working on proactive things instead of firefighting all day. To the manager, same thing. Like, why are all my people firefighting? Why do they not understand? My bosses are on me to like produce more, and we can't because my people don't understand the process well enough. And it's you have to appeal to each stakeholder's goal, and that's sometimes that's even a part we forget. So
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, technologically, it's become easier by the day to solve most of these problems. So
yep.
I totally agree with you there. So another big topic that you talk about a lot is the need for high quality and high fidelity data for data-driven operations, right? Which is often a challenge for most industrial organizations. So my questions to you is, how can industries overcome the hurdles of data quality and fidelity?
One is to acknowledge that they need it and that they don't have it today. That's just admitting that would be a huge step in the right direction. And I don't care if it's process data. I've talked to people who work with, accounting data, supply chain data, finance data, and anything that's even not related to what we do. We all gripe about the same challenge: is the data is just not good enough, right? So one of the things that we started doing, and this is kind of unique to the PI system. I mean, if it was other historians, we'd have to handle it differently. But with the PI system, we started doing these data fidelity studies by using Pattern Discovery's compression insight software, right? And there I can actually see what is the raw data coming in versus what you're actually storing. And invariably, I get people storing way too much or way too little information. And a lot of times, engineers and the cloud providers, and there's a whole lot of people and people who have tried to argue with me and have ended up losing, have said, we don't need to worry about any of that. Just keep all the raw data. I'm like, okay, so I have this temperature sensor that has a plus or minus 2 degree range. And the data goes from 70.1 degrees to 70.11 degree. Keep that? That's meaningful? No. And it can only move so fast. I've been around, being a controls engineer, I saw this, especially doing like PID tuning, right? Especially temperature loops. I could pour the coals to the quote unquote, put all the heat that I wanted to a process. It might be 30 seconds to a minute before I see a degree of change. I see people scanning temperatures at 1 second. How fast can it physically change? I see people with a 500,000 gallon tank and they're scanning the level once a second. Okay, if you turn the pump on to empty that thing as fast as you could, how fast would it go? I would lose about 1% an hour. Why are you scanning it once a second? And keeping all the data, right? And so I try to really, educate people and just get them to think through things systematically. How accurate are my sensors? Because the big thing in IoT, as you and I have noticed, over the last 7, 8, 10 years, is put sensors on everything. Okay, that's fine. Okay, store all the data. Okay, I've got a company that's looking to do 8 million sensors. Okay, 8 million sensors. Let's say you look at it every second and you store everything. Then you want to do a machine learning model on it, or just even do a basic dashboard, or do a dashboard and say, hey, I want to pull a year's worth of data and I've got, 20 data points on this and I want a trend of each one. That's going to take a little while, right? Think through it as a system, right? Most people don't. How fast do I need to collect the data? How much of it do I need to really keep, based on instrument error? No one ever thinks through those things. They're just like, keep all the data, and the data scientists don't help. because they're like, oh, I want 1 second data. Don't throw any of it away. I'll clean it later. It's kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to, like when I move next, I'm going to downsize my house. Well, I'm not going to drag everything with me and then sell it. I'm going to sell it first. I'm going to get it all cleaned out and then I'll move that. Right. So I try to teach people, get your data quality and fidelity right on the front end. Then you don't have to worry about so much cleaning and downsampling and all. I mean, you will, more times than not, you still have to do some downsampling and things like that. A lot of times we're looking at major swings in a process, it may be 5 minute, 15 minute, or 1 hour data that we're looking at to see that. You don't need 1 second data more times than not for what we're doing. Very rarely. You just cannot see the change that quickly. And so it just depends on what you're doing. Like I just did a data fidelity study for a big power company and, almost 950,000 data points. There are signals that they have that they absolutely need to keep once a second, and they have very tight control ranges. Fine, not a problem. Then on those signals and those signals only, you try to keep almost all the data. Then you're wasting a whole bunch of disk space, bandwidth, and other things on temperatures, certain levels, certain things that just cannot physically change that fast. Tune those down a little bit. And they were storing way too much data and they were having serious performance issues. And so I just try to get people to think about it, like I said, systematically. What can this instrument reasonably produce? How fast can this data reasonably change meaningfully? And start working toward that's what you store.
Interesting. Now, there are different approaches to implementing process-related analytics. So it could be through, I think, as you have already alluded to, first principles. There's multivariate data analysis, and lately we've got some AI or advanced machine learning algorithms. So how should organizations decide between using these different approaches?
That's always a tricky question. Me personally, I'm a first principles first kind of a guy in general. Okay. In general. Sometimes the challenge though is you don't really have a good handle on what those first principles really look like. And sometimes the machine learning models can tell you a lot more about them. What is it that actually drives these processes? Often it's not, because kind of the reason why people do AI or machine learning is there's an interaction between things that we can't see or we don't understand, right? And often it's much simpler than that. It's usually one or two things, three things that really drive quality or really drive throughput. And they may not have a good understanding on it, and an ML model can help you understand that. And then you can build some univariate tools to help you understand that. So sometimes we've started there with a customer, like they don't feel like they have a good handle. Matter of fact, I'm doing that with a chemical company right now. Matter of fact, I need to respond to an email about that. But they have some issues. They have some swings in a particular, variable, and they don't really understand like where it's coming from. Why is that happening? And so sometimes, an ML model to start can kind of help guide you back to the right first principles, solution. There's a lot of industries that they have a good handle on their first principles. They just don't have a way to tell that story very well. They don't have good dashboards. They don't do any kind of management by exception. You talk to some of these people, they're like, oh, we know what actually causes our problems. We just don't manage it well. They have their operators looking at 500 things instead of the 50 that they really need to pay attention to, or the 20 or the 5, right, that drive everything. And therefore they get a little distracted. They can't see, these things that they know are going to cause them problems. They don't necessarily see it because they're not paying attention to that specific thing at that specific moment. So how do you manage those by exception, and let people know like, hey, this is coming. So we try to really ask, customers about that, do they have a good understanding of it? And if so, let's just do some management by exception, some good dashboarding. And sometimes if not, we can start with some of the multivariate models that we do. Like we use SIMCA a lot, which is made by Sartorius Steedham. It's been very helpful. One of our customers, taught Ben and I how to use it. And then I actually got us training last fall, on that software. So, there's 5 of the 6 of us. Nick wasn't with us yet when we got that training, but at least this way we have a tool that we can pull out of the bag and say, okay, well, you don't really understand that problem. Okay, well, let's throw some data at it and let's ask some specific questions of that data, and see if we can help you narrow in, on it. And honestly, sometimes you can't figure it out. Like sometimes it's just they're not collecting the data you need, or various reasons, or there's an interaction you just can't see or find. We've seen that a number of times, but we've also nailed some stuff that took them a lot longer to figure out, or they didn't necessarily believe at first, so we've got some stories on that. But like I said, to me, more times than not, you can explain things rather simply through the chemistry, the physics, whatever it is you're trying to make. There's only so many ways that it can be done. A lot of the industries we work in have been around for a really long time. So the book's kind of written on how certain things are made. So a lot of times first principles, they just don't have a good idea, and they think they need all this generative AI and everything. Well, they ignore that their data quality is crap. And so therefore they throw a bunch of problems, and they don't have specific things that they're looking for. They just think AI is going to solve everything, and they get super disappointed. So we always try to boil it back to a first principle solution. Either we may take an ML approach at it because they don't have a good understanding, or we try to help them, if they have a good understanding, get good first principles, things built. So everything is a tool, right? Sometimes for me, multivariate models, machine learning is the sledgehammer to kill a fly. Yes, it will kill the fly, but it is overkill. You could have killed the fly with a fly swatter.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
we just try. So we've been burned a few times. We've made mistakes too, and so but typically you're trying to, a lot of times, boil it back to first principles.
Yeah. So maybe let's kind of like dive a little bit deeper into that issue, because also what I find is that some machine learning is not well understood in the process or manufacturing industry, as it were. And what you find is that a lot of organizations are adopting it prematurely, to your point, and in some cases, maybe not without not having the right data infrastructure for it. So in your experience, what are the signs that an organization might be jumping the gun with AI and ML, and how can they better evaluate their readiness to integrate and leverage these technologies effectively?
I'll tell a story here in a minute about a company that I think jumped the gun, one that we've done some business with. I think how you tell is when they have almost no good dashboarding, no management by exception. They're not collecting all the data that they need or want. And they think ML or AI is going to solve all those problems. It's going to solve everything no matter what. That's just wrong. We also think that in many cases, the data literacy throughout the organization is just not there. Sometimes even the passion to solve problems isn't there. Like we did a little joint project with a new company that we hadn't dealt with before in this space. And the guy we were working with at the end customer, he got it. And we were looking for some very specific things, and it turned out we ended up we were comparing apples and oranges. But one of the things that he was struggling to do is to get anyone at the plants and the experts, the domain experts on this manufacturing process, to engage with him to actually go dive deeper and solve the problems. That's a telltale sign when you don't have that curiosity up and down the organization, that you want to help go solve problems and that people are hungry to do that. They were kind of stuck in their ways. This is one of those industries where the book's been written, like they've been making this stuff for many, many years. And I still think there's value to be gained out of doing something like that, but they just didn't have the passion for it. You know, another like telltale sign, in my opinion, is the data literacy side. So we saw a customer and we counseled them to not do it. You know, they have some plants that didn't even have any kind of data historian or anything. So they went from installing a data historian. I told them, get it installed everywhere, get people looking at it, help people understand what they're looking at, you know, help them build some trends and dashboards and things that will help them. You will get value out of that just right off the bat. And then you can come back and start to fill in the holes, you know, with some of the machine learning and everything. Well, they decided, no, we're going to go all in. And they did. So literally there were some plants, they installed the data historian, and literally they built out the Pi asset framework. They built multivariate models in SIMCA and, you know, built some other tools. I'm wondering if those tools are going to stick, because the people have gone from nothing. So in other words, you don't take a baby who isn't even sitting up and trying to force them to run, right? There's steps and stages, right? It's crawl, walk, then run, right? And we see a lot of companies trying to run before they even know how or have the culture to either crawl or walk. You know, we have another company that we've done some consulting for, and I'm hoping we're going to do a lot more with them. They did the opposite. They actually listened to me, and they actually put in Canary historian. They installed it in all their plants, got it up and running, showed people what they had, built some asset models, you know, built a bunch of dashboards in Axiom, taught their people, like, this is what we've got, this is what you're looking at. They have gained that investment back probably threefold since they put it in. Just now they're starting to look at what are some of the other opportunities we can layer on. You know, can we they're layering flow on to do certain things. They're looking to maybe do some more stuff with it. They're looking to maybe potentially do some AI. They're looking to get into the business intelligence world. But they did the right thing in that they laid that foundation of, let's get this in and get people used to looking at the data and get them excited. We're like, oh, wow, I'm learning things that I never knew. Wow, my job's easier today because I have this. Like, this is indispensable.
Yep.
Then you can start to slowly introduce these other things. Like, you can't do it just like that. And too many companies, I feel like, have done it. And I even did a video not that long ago. My friend Adam Napolitano told, you know, we were having a conversation one day. It's like, man, why are people not getting all this stuff? You know, why is this still so hard? And he said, Jimmy goes, I think people have gotten burned now. They've bought the hype, they've done all this stuff, and they didn't reap the benefit because they didn't do it the right way. And now they feel like they're burnt and they are just choosing not to do anything. And he may be right. I think some companies are there. Not everybody, but some are.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, you have kind of like mentioned a few tools. So maybe let's dive a bit into the specifics of the tech stack. So what is the typical tech stack used in data-driven solutions? Are there any tools or platforms you'd recommend? And maybe if we can share some concrete example use cases where a platform that you've used significantly enhanced the process analytics.
Well, obviously the Pi system's been a big one for us, you know, for many, many years, right? You know, we do all kinds of stuff in Pi asset framework and their event calculation engine, their analytics engine. just putting together things in ways that people can understand things better, right? And then push them up on PyVision. We've pushed that data into Power BI. We've used SIMCA on top of that. I mean, that's obviously a base tool that we've used a lot. Canary is another one that, we've recommended a few times, and, we think we haven't had as many reps on that one, but, we want to get there, so, we like what they're doing. They certainly have some things. The guys over at Data Park, have some great solutions. They've been around the paper industry, but they've expanded into a lot of other industries and, doing some things. They have some ready-made solutions out of the box that's kind of unique, because they came from more of an integrator background, then built a product on top of that. So they've kind of turned from an integrator into like more of a product company. And so they've done some neat things. We like Flow. I think what Flow makes Flow unique is it's all the things we're doing with Asset Framework decoupled from any of the data systems. So I can connect to whatever data historian I have. Like we have a customer that has Canary, Factory Talk Historian, Pi, IP21.
Yeah.
I don't see them ever reconciling that into one platform, one historian solution across their entire organization. I don't see them doing that for various reasons. But the thing is, you can put Flow on top and connect to, other systems like MES systems and ERP systems and build standardized calculations, dashboards, all that, that pull a lot of that data together. So we're pretty excited about what they're working on. And I know there's a couple of other, solutions kind of like that, out there. I think those are going to come into play more often. The multivariate machine learning space is so, oh my gosh, it is so fragmented. I don't even know where to begin there. So we've worked with both SIMCA, as I've mentioned, and we work with a platform called Lytics, a company called Lytics. They've got a kind of an interesting, platform. They had a really nice talk at Aviva World last year, and so we got introduced to them. I'm pretty excited. They have some things that could be really interesting. We need some more run with it, but they're great people, and they kind of work with customers the same way we do. They just want to go help people solve problems. Yeah. So culturally, they fit us really, really well. And then it's just super fragmented. Seek is doing a lot of really great things. We took another look at them, I guess earlier this year. I ran into my old friend Steve Woodward that I worked with at OSIsoft and at a TAPICon conference, which is a paper conference, and he was telling me how excited he was about everything. And so we took another look at him, like, wow, you guys really made some serious strides in the last 5 or 6 years, and this is super exciting. They're doing some really cool stuff in that analytics space. Some friends of ours at IOTA Software are doing some web-based visualizations on top of both Pi and Seek, but I'm sure they're going to build drivers for other things the way that they're working, and they're doing some unique things, even some potential 3D, modeling. So you could literally kind of build a 3D model of a plant as an operator interface, kind of a interaction, which is very interesting and unique. So we like the direction they're going. So I don't know, Kudzai, I think it's going to get a lot more fragmented before people figure it out. I mean, Pi has been a major player for a lot of years, right? And a lot of larger companies, especially continuous and batch process companies, really relied on that. Then when you got into more of the discrete stuff, outside of the integrated steel mills like steel industry, paper, or food industry, food and bev, and some other smaller industries, it got really fragmented. You'd see Wonderware historian, you'd see Canary, you'd see a lot of other things. Some ignition in there and some other things that are kind of unique to their industry. But to me, I like to see things that you can get data in and out of, that you can build other solutions on top, because there's no really one platform still yet that you're going to be able to build everything that you ever want to do.
Yep, totally agree.
Right. We love the Pi system. It's great. but you can't do any of like the machine learning, or you can't really slice and dice things like in a dashboard. You're like, hey, I want to look at these conditions only when these, or I want to look at this trend only when these certain conditions are true. Well, you can't do that in PyVision. You can't do it in Canary's Axiom, right? That's not what they're built for. That's a business intelligence tool like Power BI or Tableau or Seek, potentially because they can do some of that. So you have to have something that you feel comfortable with, that you can get data in and out of, that you can move things around and really build more of a framework and a structure and an infrastructure out of it, versus you got to figure out how to integrate all these disparate systems together. You probably see me recently talk to Lance Fountain, a lot. When he was at Alcoa and had just come on board at OSIsoft, he kind of taught me to think about, here's how you think about data, right? And he was using the Pi system as an example. He said, if somebody comes to me with this OEE solution or an energy management solution, right, I have to have this foundational layer of data, and for us, it's the Pi system, right? Oh, you have a new OEE system? Okay, well, just plug into my data, right? And do whatever you want to do. Oh, you have a new energy management system? Great, just plug into my data, right? And I don't have to tie these two systems together and start spaghetti coding all of these things together. I'm plugging into more of a platform. And he said, then, if somebody 2 or 3 years from now comes up with a better energy management solution or a better OEE solution, I just unplug the old one and plug the new one in. And I'm not having to worry about all those integrations, right?
Yeah.
And that was in 2013. He showed me that, or talked to me about that over lunch. And that probably forever changed how I look at things. But now I think it's even gotten more complex, because you have all these other systems, and you want to tie maintenance data and supply chain data and some ERP transactional data along with your real-time data out of your plant from your historian or whatever application you have.
Yeah.
You have to have ways to do that. And that's why I think, a company like Flow is building something super interesting, right? I know you had a talk with Jeff not long ago. Like, to me, those kind of things I think are going to get more important as time goes on, as things get more complex. So,
Okay.
I mean, even Aviva's doing some of that, right? They're trying to get people to, tie some more things together, because they know that not every piece of data is going to be necessarily in the Pi system for them, right? A lot of the really important stuff is, but not everything's there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
So
so I mean,
those are just some of the technologies, but the reality is, I think what you have to, as a user, you have to think about is this really a platform that I can move data in and out of easily? That I can get the data in easily from my control systems out to, or integrate it to, other systems, because there's nothing that you're going to put all in one system.
oh yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the ecosystem is getting more and more fragmented, with some tools specifically for a specific function, and really the idea is to get your use a platform that allows you to get data in and out, right?
Right.
So I think totally agree with you on that one.
I mean, think about how fragmented the MES space is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's super fragmented. If someone wants to buy an MES system, I mean, I know like the paper industry has like 3 or 4 solutions that pretty much they're focused at that industry. You wouldn't use it in a food and bev plant.
Yeah.
And just like you wouldn't use the stuff in a food and bev plant at a paper mill, right? It's so fragmented. But if you can easily get data in and out, to integrate with other systems, other data systems you're using, that's a lot better.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So Jim, before we close this session off, I want to kind of like get your take on a topic that I think is super important for the industry. You've already kind of talked about how many experienced industrial personnel are retiring and leaving relatively young, inexperienced engineers to take care of production. So,
Yep.
I mean, how critical is this impending knowledge drain, and what strategies do you recommend for capturing this invaluable domain knowledge into digital tools so that to ensure like a continued success of process organizations?
Wow. I think it is the issue of the day for industrial manufacturers. In some cases, I'm beginning to wonder if it's not too late. I've done two videos. One I did on LinkedIn that got me the most views of any video I've ever done. And it was just this quick hot take. This was probably like 3 or 4 years ago. And I literally said, our industrial plants are going to be running worse in 10 years than they are today, even with all this technology. It won't be the technology's fault. It will be because we didn't transfer the domain knowledge. We let people get away before we got it captured. We didn't put an emphasis on it. And so now you're going to have all these young people running around trying to put all these tools in place, and they don't even know what good looks like. They don't even know, like, well, how do we make this product well? They've only been in the plant 2 years. I haven't been through the wars and seen all of the things. And I think a lot of companies haven't captured that knowledge. And I think now is the time, and matter of fact, we saw it with COVID. There was a bunch of people that took their toys and went home. They retired. They said, you know what? It's a good time. I think I'm going to take that package and leave. So therefore, I think it's even more critical. The ones we have left, we've got to pull all their knowledge out and somehow get it into some digital tools that these younger people have a chance. Because, and I'm sure you're seeing it over in Europe too, and maybe even you saw this in South Africa as well, but all of our organizations are getting much younger, and our younger people aren't staying in the same position for 20, 25, 30 years anymore. That's just not happening. They're just not this need or want to build that craftsmanship. Like I want to stay in this role or this industry and truly become an expert and a craftsman. People really aren't encouraged to do that so much anymore. I play golf. I was watching this thing not that long ago on a Japanese golf club manufacturer. They make everything kind of by hand, and they've kept it in the family. And these guys work for years to develop this craftsmanship. They still pretty much hand make everything. I mean, there is machinery, obviously, but they're all hand finished. And the knowledge that they have and the craftsmanship and the beauty of what they produce and how it performs, is amazing, right? I'm like, how do we get that back in manufacturing? How do we get people who want to be craftspeople like that? And I try to encourage our people to do that, right? I have to, I always tell everybody when I hire them, like, I hope this is the last job you ever take, but I'm not naive enough to think it will be, because it's just not how the world is today. But I do try to get them to really try to think about how to be craftsmen, in what they're doing. And I think this is the issue of our day, Kudzai. I think our jobs are going to get very, very difficult in the coming years, trying to help people get their manufacturing processes back on the rails. And we're going to have to look back, years at the data and say, okay, well, here's what you did to do things right 5, 6, 10, 12 years ago. Hopefully they've got enough good data that we can put that picture together again. I hope.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think for me also that's kind of like one of the things that were strikingly different from the software industry. So I went into the software industry first before industrial automation. And,
Right.
In the software industry, people like stay in companies for 2, 3 years and then they leave. And then
Yep.
moving into industrial automation, you find someone there who's been at the same company for like 30 years, 40 years.
Mhm.
I mean, some software companies don't even live to be 10 years old, right? So it was significantly different. And for all of that information to go away in a few years, it's tragic, right? So I think certainly
It's scary.
Yeah, something that needs to be captured into digital tools. So
yeah, it's actually really scary. It concerns me, but it also encourages me that, hey, what we are doing, what things people like you and I are doing, even though you and I probably take different approaches to get to the same, goal, because you're helping people who don't necessarily, they may not have a pie system. Like, well, how can I get data from here to there into something where I can start doing something with it? You've been very, very good at that over the years, to show people there's lots of ways to get it there, with open technologies, right? I'll show you. And I think that's like really critical, but also what we just talked about is our job security for the next 15 years.
Yep.
People are going to need this more. It's just going to be difficult. But then again, if we're good at what we do, and we have good experience and good experienced people, and maybe we have to go hire some of those experts, and out of retirement, and pay them. And that, I think that's what some companies are actually doing. I'm seeing that in some of our companies. They'll literally hire somebody back on, by the hour. The people don't work full time, but it's literally to get that knowledge capture and maybe get some things into some digital tools. We're working on one right now where, this process engineer had built a bunch of stuff in Pi Batch View that's been a tool that's been kind of legacy for a long time, and we're trying to replicate all that functionality in Power BI. It's not super easy because that was a well-built tool for a very specific purpose at a specific moment in time, and he's very, very good at it. So he knows all the nuances of it, and so he looks at things a certain way. And we're trying to like figure out all those nuances, and every time like Philip's working on it and he's like, hey, Cecil, what do you think of this? Well, you still haven't thought of this. And Philip's like, well, I didn't even know you're doing that.
yeah.
And that's the challenge, man. It's hard. But I think, we certainly can't, give up, because it's without people like us, I don't know that manufacturing is going to have a shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hate to sound that way, but
Yeah.
I believe, I just see it. I feel like it's critical, and some companies are getting it.
Yep.
They're trying to capture that knowledge. Some aren't. Some still have their head in the sand, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, on that note, Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show and chatting with us.
Appreciate it.
And thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights with the community.
Appreciate
Really
you inviting me.
look forward to having you on the show again soon.
Yeah, I think it was a LinkedIn comment. Somebody said you two need to get together.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you to that. So I think that is really important. So again, thank you so much, Jim, for taking the time to join us today on the show, and have a great day.
Appreciate it. Thanks.